still remember the morning of the mansion inauguration, as if the world had planned a performance just for my humiliation. The sky was too bright, the air too crisp, the birds too cheerful for what would become one of the most painful days of my life. When my husband told me we were expected at his mother's grand event, I had hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should really go. His mother had never hidden her dislike for me. From the moment we met, her eyes always scanned me like I was an offense, someone who didn't belong beside her precious son. But when he insisted that it would look inappropriate if his wife didn't attend, I agreed. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to be the kind of woman who didn't give anyone a reason to talk. So I dressed carefully that morning, spent extra time styling my hair, and chose the most elegant outfit I had. Not flashy, not too bold, just enough to look respectable. He barely looked at me on the drive there. His hand stayed tight on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed straight ahead as though thinking about something important. When I asked if everything was okay, he just muttered, "It's a big day for my mom. I don't want any issues." The words stung a little. Issues. Since when had my presence become an issue? The mansion came into view as we turned into the private road lined with perfectly trimmed trees that seemed too uniform to be natural. The building stood tall and gleaming, a parade of white marble, tall pillars, and sparkling windows. It was impressive, yes, but in a cold, intimidating way, like someone had built it simply to prove they were above everyone else. A long red carpet extended from the driveway to the enormous front doors, where photographers were already waiting, cameras clicking constantly as SUV after SUV arrived with well-dressed guests ready to flatter their way into my mother-in-law's good graces. My husband stepped out first. Instantly, people turned toward him with smiles and greetings. He slipped into the crowd effortlessly, as if born for moments like this. I stepped out behind him, but the moment I did, something shifted. Conversations paused for just a second, and then eyes moved away, as if avoiding acknowledging me was easier than accepting my presence. "Stay close," he murmured under his breath, but he didn't wait for me. He walked ahead while I followed a step behind, a shadow rather than a partner. Inside, the foyer was even more extravagant. A massive chandelier hung overhead, glittering like a crown of diamonds. A string quartet played softly near the center, and guests wandered around admiring the newly decorated walls, golden vases, and imported artwork. And then I saw her. My mother-in-law stood near the staircase, surrounded by a group of her friends, smiling proudly as if she were a queen greeting loyal subjects. But the moment her eyes landed on me, her smile vanished. She stared, long, slow, deliberate, with the kind of disgust she didn't bother hiding. She leaned toward the woman next to her, whispering something behind a manicured hand. The ladies glanced at me, their lips curling into small, polite, but not really polite smiles. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to at least acknowledge what had just happened. He saw it. I knew he saw it. But instead of taking my hand or reassuring me, he cleared his throat and gestured discreetly toward a quieter corner away from everyone. "Come here for a second," he said, sounding tense. I followed him up the side of the staircase until we reached a dimmer spot where no one seemed to be paying attention. He kept his back to the crowd, his face troubled, his fingers rubbing anxiously against his wedding ring. "What's wrong?" I asked softly. He exhaled slowly, as though preparing himself to say something unpleasant. "Listen, there's something I need to tell you, and I need you to stay calm." My chest tightened. "What is it?" He didn't look me in the eyes. "My mother doesn't want you here." I felt the words hit me physically, like he had pushed me backward. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd heard correctly. "She doesn't want me here," I repeated. He nodded, still avoiding my eyes. "She thinks it'll draw attention. This ceremony is important to her. She wants everything perfect." Perfect. The word tasted bitter. "And you told her I was coming," I said carefully. "Yes," he answered quickly. "Of course I did. But she insisted that it might be better if..." "Better if what?" I whispered, even though my heart already knew. He pressed his lips together and finally met my eyes. "If you leave. Just for today." The floor felt like it shifted under my feet. Heat spread through my face and chest, a mix of embarrassment and brokenness. "You brought me all the way here to tell me that I'm not welcome." He winced, looking guilty for a second, but only for a second. "I didn't know how to tell you in the car," he said weakly. "I thought maybe she'd change her mind. But she's really stressed today. I don't want to make this worse." "So I'm the one who makes things worse," I said quietly. "Not her constant disrespect, not her insults, not her behavior. Just me." He ran a hand through his hair. "Please, don't make this harder. She's under pressure." "And I'm not." My voice cracked, humiliation filling every inch of me. "I'm your wife. Why do I always have to be the one who steps back?" He sighed in frustration, like I was the unreasonable one. "Please just understand. This is important to her. She wants to create a certain image today." The word, image, cut through me like glass. I stared at him, truly seeing him in that moment, not as the man I married, but as a boy terrified of disappointing his mother, a boy who would sacrifice me again and again just to keep her happy. "What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard. "Maybe go wait in the car, just for a little while, until the ceremony's over." My breath hitched, my ears rang, and for a few seconds everything around me went silent. The music, the chatter, even the footsteps on the marble floor. I felt myself shrinking inside, folding inward to protect myself from a blow I never expected. "You want me to sit outside," I said slowly, "while you stand beside her and pretend I don't exist." His silence was the answer. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not where she could see. Not where her friends could whisper and smirk. I took a small step back, putting distance between us. Not physically, but emotionally. A distance he didn't even try to close. "I can't believe you brought me here," I said. "I should have known." He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize or maybe to make another excuse, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked away, pushing through the grand hall with my heart pounding painfully in my chest. Guests smiled as I passed them, completely unaware of how shattered I felt inside. When the sunlight hit my face outside, I realized how close I was to crying. My vision blurred as I walked down the steps, gripping the railing to steady myself. I reached the car, opened the door, and sat inside, letting the door close softly behind me. And then it happened. The tears came in waves, heavy, uncontrollable, silent at first and then shaking my whole body. I cried for the humiliation, for the betrayal, for the harsh truth that I had married a man who couldn't even stand up for me in front of his mother. I cried because I should have seen this coming. But somewhere beneath the heartbreak, something else began to spark, a slow, burning anger, a clarity I had never felt before. They wanted to make me feel small today. They wanted me to disappear quietly, to hide while they celebrated something I had been excluded from. But I wasn't fragile. I wasn't powerless. And as I wiped my tears, breathing shakily, I made a silent vow to myself. This would not be the last word in my story. I would not remain the woman pushed aside. I would not let them define my worth. What happened next would change everything. They just didn't know it yet. The ride back from the mansion felt like an endless tunnel, silent, suffocating, and stretched far longer than it should have been. I sat in the passenger seat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to steady the tremor that kept crawling up my fingers. My husband Amir drove with the same stiff rigidity he had shown inside the mansion, his jaw locked, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Every now and then, the light from the street lamps outside flashed across his face, exposing a flicker of guilt he was fighting to hide. But guilt doesn't stay buried for long, it leaks through the cracks, especially in silence. When we finally reached home, I stepped out before he could come around to open my door. I didn't want to be near him, didn't want to hear another excuse, and definitely didn't want to pretend I wasn't hurt. I headed straight to the bedroom, shutting the door behind me. He hesitated outside for a moment, then pushed the door open anyway, as if he had the right to intrude even on my pain. "Look," he began, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was trying to soften the blame on himself. "You took it the wrong way." I laughed. A short, bitter, humorless sound. "You told me your mother didn't want me there, at her mansion inauguration. A mansion she invited everyone else to see. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that?" He exhaled loudly, pacing. "I was just trying to avoid a scene." "A scene?" I repeated, stunned. "What scene?" I wasn't the one whispering behind her back. I wasn't the one rolling my eyes every time she turned. I wasn't the one acting like a stranger in a family gathering. "You did that, not me." He stopped pacing and his shoulders tensed. "It wasn't the right time," he muttered. "She was stressed enough. She said she doesn't want conflict," and I thought, "So you decided I was the conflict." I cut in sharply. His silence answered for him. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands on my face, trying to stop the burn in my eyes. I didn't want him to see me cry. He didn't deserve that privilege tonight. But the more I tried to swallow my feelings, the more they pushed their way up. "Amir," I said slowly, lowering my hands, "why does your mother dislike me so much? What have I done that warrants being excluded from something this important?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stared out the window as if searching for something outside that could save him from this conversation. "That mansion," I continued, voice softening. "It was her dream, I know that. I've heard her talk about it for years. I wanted to celebrate that with you. With the family. I didn't go there to compete or overshadow her. I just wanted to be included." He sat beside me, but the space between us felt like an entire ocean. "She thinks you judge her," he said quietly. "Judge her?" I shook my head instantly. "Amir, I don't judge your mother. I have never disrespected her. Not even once. She said you make her uncomfortable," he added. "She said you look at her like you're holding back comments." I stared at him, bewildered. That's just my face when I'm trying to stay polite. He sighed again, pressing his fingers into his temples. "She doesn't want tension during this new phase. So when she told me not to bring you, I agreed because I didn't want her evening ruined." "Ruined by what?" I whispered. "My presence, my existence." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the door. "I don't want to fight," he muttered, and he left. I sat there for a long time after he walked out, staring at the silent room, replaying the entire evening like a movie that refused to stop. The moment his mother walked past me without a glance, the way she held onto his arm proudly while he chose not to acknowledge me, the whispers from his relatives who hadn't seen me in months, and then the moment he leaned toward me and said those words. Words that sliced deeper than any insult his mother had ever thrown at me. "My mother doesn't want you here." For a long time, I thought the problem between us was simply miscommunication. That if I tried harder, smiled more, helped more, spoke less, maybe she would start seeing me as family. But tonight, it was clear, no amount of effort could convince someone who was determined not to like me. Later that night, when the house settled into a heavy, uncomfortable quiet, I stepped out of the bedroom and walked to the living room. Amir was half asleep on the sofa, TV playing quietly in front of him. His face looked softer in sleep, younger, almost innocent, almost like the man I married. The man who used to defend me, stand with me, pull me gently into the circle of his family and say, "She's with me." The man I once believed would always choose me. But people change, or maybe they reveal who they always were. I turned off the TV, letting the darkness settle fully around us. He stirred slightly but didn't wake. I stood there for a moment, staring at him, wondering how we reached a point where I no longer recognized him. When I finally returned to the bedroom, I picked up my phone and opened the photos from the evening. Pictures of the mansion inauguration were already circulating online. Perfect family photos. Handshakes, smiles, speeches. And not a single trace of me anywhere. It felt like erasure, as if I never existed. That's when a thought slowly began to form, unwelcome at first, but clear. This wasn't simply about tonight. This was about years of his mother quietly shifting him away from me. Years of him letting her choose his reactions, his priorities, even his silence. Years of small compromises that led to this moment. A moment where I stood outside his mother's mansion, unwelcome, unimportant, unacknowledged, and he allowed it. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling until the first light of dawn crept into the room. When Amir finally woke and came into the bedroom, I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. I didn't trust myself to speak to him. Not yet. Hours later, after he left for work, I sat alone at the dining table, letting the stillness wrap around me. I needed clarity. Not from him, not from his mother, but from myself. Why was I tolerating this? Why was I accepting treatment I would never allow for someone I loved? Why was I shrinking myself to fit into a place that clearly didn't want me? I picked up my phone again and opened the photos once more. One shot caught my attention: Amir standing beside his mother as she cut the ribbon. His expression was proud, confident, completely at peace. It was the same expression he used to have when he stood beside me. I closed the photo, set the phone aside, and leaned back in my chair. Something inside me had snapped, not in anger, but in awakening. This wasn't just about a mansion or an inauguration or a mother-in-law's pettiness. This was about respect, and that respect had been draining out of our marriage long before tonight. It was time to face that reality. When Amir returned home that evening, he looked tired, as if the weight of what had happened was finally catching up to him. He walked into the living room where I sat waiting, my posture calm, my emotions steady, for once. "We need to talk," he said. "I know," I replied. He took a seat across from me, his expression tense. "I'm sorry about last night. I shouldn't have said it like that. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said simply. "I was trying to manage the situation," he continued. "I was trying to keep peace." "What about me?" I asked. "Where do I fit into your idea of peace?" He looked down at his hands. "It's complicated." "No," I said firmly. "Complicated is when two people are trying to make things work. This is different. This is you choosing her comfort over my dignity." He looked up sharply. "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that," I corrected him. "You did not just forget to include me. You excluded me, and not accidentally. Deliberately. You told me your mother didn't want me there, and instead of standing up for me, you agreed." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Amir," I continued softly, "marriage is about partnership. Equal partnership. But I have felt alone for a long time now. I've felt like a guest in your family. Like someone who needs permission to exist beside you." He clenched his jaw, fighting defensiveness, but the truth was too clear for him to deny. "I don't want to be the person you hide," I said. "I don't want to be the person who stays home while you build a whole, separate life with your mother's approval." His face softened then, but the remorse came too late. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked, voice low. "I want you to decide," I answered. "Decide who you're protecting. Decide whose happiness matters to you. Decide whether I am a part of your life or just a convenient accessory." He stared at me, stunned into silence. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your mother," I added. "I'm asking you to choose between treating your wife with respect or continuing to let someone else dictate how you behave." He swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. Fear of losing me. Fear of facing the consequences of the choices he had been making for years without realizing their accumulation. But I wasn't done. "I will not beg to be included," I said quietly. "I will not fight for space in your life. You either make space willingly, or I stop trying." Silence stretched between us. Heavy, suffocating, charged with everything neither of us had said for months. Finally, he spoke. "You're right," he whispered. "And I've been wrong for a long time." I didn't respond, I waited. His next words came slowly, deliberately. "I'll talk to her. I'll set boundaries." "I should have done that earlier. Words are easy," I replied. I'll believe actions." He nodded, and for once, he didn't argue. The next few days were strange, quieter, softer. He tried to be around me more. Tried to talk. Tried to reconnect. Tried to show he was thinking about what I said. But the question still lingered between us like a ghost. Would he actually change? Or was this just another moment of temporary remorse before everything went back to the same cycle? I wasn't sure. But one thing had changed me. I wasn't waiting helplessly anymore. I wasn't hoping for approval or validation. I had reclaimed something far more important, my voice. And whether he stood beside me now or watched me walk away later depended entirely on whether he could finally learn to respect it.